We can probably take 2 or 3 cars and get everyone out there with the costumes and all that stuff.
You'll probably be asked to leave because that's not considered
That's not
the
a
free
free
speech
space,
zone. Even if they're on the sign.
Yeah, but I'd like to have as many people at the lighthouse as possible for that visual. Before Point Reyes was a national park, the land was privately owned by cattle and dairy industry, and there was a lot of native Tule elk and wildlife here. But before it was a national park, it was owned by private cattle ranchers. And in 1962, the National Park Service paid the equivalent of $350 million to these ranchers. The ranchers sold their land to become a national park. And those ranchers were given not just millions of dollars, they were given a 25-year lease. So they've been operating since 1987, even though they should have been phased out.
Cattle, who are an exotic species, for this climate, are they're just very damaging. If you take a look at the landscape of where ranching is going on, it looks pretty bad. It's not just the profit. It's not just that it's profit driven. It's more the nature of the activity, which makes it incompatible with a national wildlife park.
They are tied to big agriculture. And there's also a huge political reason right now, especially with the Trump administration, to increase the privatization of our public land. Unfortunately, in 2016, after years of drought, about half the Tule elk herd died. Any free-roaming wild animal would have wandered to find enough food and enough water, but since they were behind a fence, they were just left to die. There's about 6 or 7 different alternatives that the park is studying as far as what might they do with the land, and it includes shutting down all the ranching and restoring the park to what it's supposed to be intended for, which is a wildlife refuge. So that's alternative F. But there are other alternatives, including the park's preferred alternative, which is expand ranching and kill the Tule elk herd. And so that's the park's plan that they are moving forward with. And that's what we're here protesting.
And this is a national park, and these are part of what are called restricted use lands in the United States. These are the most protective lands on Earth. And so cattle ranching in a national park is in itself kind of questionable. This park has that history with it, I understand that. But the American people bought back their leases many years ago. In the 1960s, they were paid hundreds of millions basically for all these ranches. So they were allowed to lease back the land for 25 plus years. The leases have long expired. They've been given additional time to ranch. But the bottom line is it's irresponsible for native species of Tule elk to be shot in a national park. So they went through a general management plan amendment. A lot of people participated. We believe the majority of people have supported protecting the elk, but the National Park Service is recommending the alternative that protects the cattle ranches and then culls or kills the Tule elk.
And I think if the public were to get involved, we would all say, save the Tule elk and kick out the most destructive industry in the park. And that's actually what's happening. So today we did a peaceful demonstration of an elk die-in, where we had a bunch of people come and lay down dressed as the dead elk as a foreshadowing event, because this is what's planning to be happening. And it's just a chance to educate people who came out to the lighthouse. This lighthouse is one of the major tourist attractions in the park, and it's a spectacular spot on the coast. It's the most western part in the country, I think. In order to get to the lighthouse, you have to drive through basically the story of what's going on in Point Reyes. You drive through many of the cattle and dairy industry ranches and you see their land. You see their baby calf pens, all the baby cows who are separated from their mothers. You see completely degraded land from years and years of overgrazing and mismanagement. You see polluted waters. You see sprinklers spraying manure water over the land. So you see all of this, and you see the Drake's Beach herd Tule elk. So that's a small herd. It's at about 124 elk right now, and that's the herd that will get shot because they're eating the rancher's grass. So by the time you arrive at the lighthouse, you've seen how destructive the industry is. You might even see some elk, and then you get to this beautiful spot, and it's clear the public wants to see beautiful things. They want to see spectacular things, and they don't want to see, like, no one's stopping to look at the cows.
So what's at stake here, and what we're showing with the die-in, is that it's really a life and death situation that's happening here. Where, as we enter the 6th grade extinction, species all across the planet are at risk of disappearing forever. And the Tule elk is not, even though we now have 5,000 Tule elk that exist, it's still 1% of the former population, and there's no guarantee that that's enough Tule elk to be able to maintain genetic diversity.
And now the elk number about 5,000. According to my calculations, if we had a simple growth rate of 33%, there should be close to over 90,000 elk. So where have all the Tule elk gone? That's a great question. It's a great question for the California Department of Fish and Game, which is now Fish and Wildlife. But again, their job is to protect the elk, and they think 5,500 is plenty. I don't agree. The Tule elk went through a population bottleneck, means that when there was less than 10, they lost all those gene alleles. And so any changes in climate and other kinds of change can mean serious issues for these elk. It doesn't mean they're protected. So this place should be one of the places they're fully protected forever.